Hi, Dave. Happy Monday.
Happy Monday. It is
Isn't it?
Monday.
It is. It
And
is
I am
Monday.
so happy. It's unbelievable. I'm
That's
rarely
why I
this
said you
happy.
are rarely this happy. I've already forgotten what this episode is about because we've had no less than four different conversations between our pre-meeting and when I pressed record.
We'll try not to screw it up, okay? Come on.
I mean, do you know what we're talking about today?
Episode 14.
It is episode 14. Okay. So in our last episode, we talked about how it's all connected, that being how identity and mission as a people are connected. You put in my notes, we are the light of the world. Dave makes notes for me.
Yeah.
And that verse is all about identity, which I didn't know about until you just told me today. The let your light shine, therefore, is all about mission. We are the light, our identity. Let your light shine, therefore. That is our mission. And it is all connected. You can't have one without the other.
Mhm.
In Jesus' final prayer in John 17, which I actually just looked at while we were talking because I wasn't even sure what prayer it was that you were talking
Any
about.
question?
I don't know. I don't know anymore. I told you you're sending me into a midlife crisis. But he's praying not only for his disciples there, but also for the church, for us, the church, the
Yep.
future generations.
But very specific. I didn't write the verse down, but he's praying to the Father for the disciples, but for those who are to follow, powerful dynamic of John 17 that he's praying for us, for the church, for this church that we are part of right now. Go. Yep.
Insane.
It is.
He's praying that we would understand, that we would come to believe that he was sent by God to declare the name of God and to reveal the nature of God. And that we would also come to understand and believe that they had been sent as a people for the very same purpose. He was praying this over God's people. He was praying this over those to come, to declare the name of God, to reveal the nature of God, and to the people who don't know God, which all points to and is this phrase that you talk about, being the incarnational presence of God. He was praying that we would do that they would do that by being the body of Christ, which I love that phrase. And yet it's so overused and so misunderstood. But
It's
it's truly the embodiment of Christ, is what you and I were just talking about.
right.
So last week, you connected all of this for us, that we are the body of Christ in the world, that we are the incarnational presence of Christ in the world. And that's all about identity. And that our mission is to declare the name of God, to reveal the character of God to the people who don't know God. So today, you're going to unpack this even more. You have a lot of juice because, again, we went about 7 different directions just in our
Yeah.
conversation before this. But this is your cue. Can you take it from here and unpack this incarnation for us, this mission for us?
Yeah. Yeah. I do have a lot of juice for this. Even as we talk about it, I can feel it rising. And it's one of those things, and we've talked about this before, that it's that when you find a theme that is kind of from the beginning to the end, we're kind of on to something. And so the place I would start in trying to unpack a little bit more this incarnational presence and how we are to embody or incarnate Christ, it actually began in the beginning. And as early as Genesis 12, where God, through Abraham, was going to call out a people, and he was calling out a people, and they would be blessed, but they weren't being blessed just so they could feel good about themselves, though that feels good to be blessed. They were being blessed in order to bless. So he was calling out a people, not only to be blessed, but to bless, but also a people through whom God would be able to reveal who he was to the world by how God's people lived and loved. When people in the world noticed how God's people lived and loved, they would be drawn to who God is. N.T. Wright, that theologian that I've made mention of quite often, he reminds me very much of Dallas Willard, called what I'm describing right now God's great dream. And from Genesis to Revelation, from the beginning of the book to the end of the book, the dream of God, this plan of God, is affirmed and reaffirmed in a variety of ways. Actually, in 1 John 4:12, we even touched on this in our very first episode, Annika. And one of the things, and this kind of creates this problem, and it's a setup for the incarnational reality of our presence in the world. It's that 1 John 4:12 says, no man has seen God at any time, which is a problem. How are you going to know God if you don't see God, can't see God? But then the next verse in 1 John 4:12, 1 John 4:13, actually the rest of the chapter is this: but if we love one another, no man see God at any time, but if we love one another, people who have no idea who God is might just get a glimpse by seeing the love we have for one another, because, and this is my phrase, because nothing has more power on earth to reveal the face of God than when the people of God demonstrate in tangible ways the love of God, especially for an enemy. Okay, put that into the culture that we live in, whether it be a political enemy or some of the culture wars enemies that we really, I really am opposed to some things that are going on in our culture, but nothing reveals the face of God more than the love of God through the people of God, especially for someone we're really disagreeing with. Holy moly. And I have more about on this on our next session, and all of this again is an issue I'm going to deal with more in our next episode. But let me just give you a taste of that thing in Matthew 5:46. This is about loving an enemy. Jesus says this. He's into the Sermon on the Mount now. The Beatitudes ended at verse 14, but he continues to go on, and he says this about love: if we love those who love us, who agree with us, what reward have we? Let me kind of change the language. If you love those who love you, agree with you, what reward have you? Who cares about that? That's what he's saying. Who cares? Big deal that you love people like you. That's easy. Everybody does that. Well, that's exactly what Jesus says. Even the tax gatherers do that. And if you greet or are respectful to your brothers only, to people who deserve respect, and there are some people who deserve respect, and I give them respect because I like them. But if they're the only people you greet with respect, what are you doing other anything different than anybody else? What are you doing more than others? Because even the Gentiles do that. Big deal, Christian. You love people who talk like you and think like you. Wow. No, that's not a wow. That's a nothing. Everybody does that. I am kind of wired today. There's just nothing special about that. There's nothing compelling about that. There's nothing that's going to change the world about that. There's no different way. That's everybody's way about that. But there's nothing that has more power to reveal the face of God to someone who doesn't know God than when the people of God demonstrate some sort, in some tangible way, the love of God. Doesn't mean you agree with people necessarily. But if we love our enemies, and not just people we agree with or even like, and even start thinking about how could I do that better than I do, we're onto something. Whether we can do it yet, we're on something there. More compelling than a sermon, being able to love someone, be respectful to someone who we really disagree with, maybe doing some harm, and they even need to be stopped, but at the same time, I don't know what the tangible love would look like, but just hang with me and use your own imagination a little. It's that kind of thing in the world we live in any world, but in the world we live in right now with the polarization is more compelling than a sermon, more moving than a song, more convincing than a creed. I believe in this, I believe in that. I don't care what you believe, right? Okay.
Yeah.
It has the power to reveal the face of God. 1 John 4:12, to make known the name of God. Colossians 4, I kind of fast forwarded it a little bit from Genesis 12, but I came back from 1 John, whatever that was. The Apostle Paul in Colossians 4 is wrapping up his thoughts to the Colossians. And what he's reminding them of, this is, I remember this very well, at the end of the epistle is about their mission and also his mission. In verse 3, he says simply this. In fact, he says, I want you to pray for me that I might make known with boldness the mystery of the gospel. That's his mission. That's the one thing that he was committed to. But he's also reminding them of their mission, and their mission, our mission, is to make known the mystery. Well, that's all this weird Bible language, make known the mystery. What is the mystery? Well, he talked about that in Colossians 1:26 and 27. Indeed, the mission, he says, which was hidden from past ages and generations, but now has been revealed to the saints. The mystery is this: Christ in you. Stop right there. You've heard that a million times. This is the secret sauce. Christ, the risen Christ in you. That's incarnation. Christ is embodied in me. When God became flesh, Word became flesh and dwelt among us. That's Christmas. That's incarnation. God embodied in Jesus. We are now Christ in you. That's incarnation. Christ in you, alive in you by his Spirit in you, which means, among other things, that this whole thing about people becoming Christian or being a Christian is not just about information. It's not just information about Christ that needs to be made known. It's not just information about Christ that needs to be made visible. It's the life of Christ that needs to be seen. How does that happen? Watch a movie. No. If Christ is in you and in me and growing in you and in me, that's where it's going to be seen. That's Jesus' prayer in John 17, that they would see that I have sent them now to reveal my face. I came to reveal your face. And so now I'm in them, and that they would do the same is the dream of God. It's his life, not just information about his life that you better agree with, or I'm gonna hate you. That needs to be made visible, which raises some questions, particularly for the church. The Big C church is what I'm thinking of. The first is this: do we have the life? And that would just mean, do we have the information about the life? Do we have the right theology? That's not what I'm asking. I don't care if you do. I kind of care about that. I'm a theology guy. But do you have the life of Christ in you? And is it growing in you, being made visible in you? Or do you just have religion, which is what most people, I think, have? Second question, is there any evidence of that life? You ask yourself, do you have the life? And this goes back to previous episodes, Annika, where we talked about, I grew up when it was all about being saved. Are you saved? You could kind of know that you were saved. How? Because you prayed the prayer. Well, okay, I'm saved. Okay, you are saved. Okay, and I think it's an important question. The bigger question is, are you alive? It's harder to answer. Am I alive? Am I spiritually alive? Am I alive to the movements of the Spirit? Am I alive to the fact that Christ is in me, and I'm not here to just live for myself, blah, blah, blah. Boy, I'm ADD in you guys today, sorry. So the first question is, do you have the life? Second question, is there any evidence of that life? Third is this: what do people see? So you think there might be some evidence of that life. Well, let's ask your neighbor, what do people see in us? And does what people see in us, and by us, I'm really it's me, it's you, but it's us. It's the Big C church right now. The face of the church, which is actually Christ. What do they see? And does any of what they see have any resemblance to who Christ is? I'll get that later. And does it bear any resemblance to the Christ we say we know? Dallas Willard has this haunting quote. He says, what then are we to say about the multitudes on both the right and the left of the theological and political spectrum who self-identify as Christians? We're all Christians. On the right, on the left, evangelical Christians. Now, I just thought of, this is not, there's so many people I could pick on, but one that's in my mind, because I just read something about this Lauren Boebert, and she's new to me. She's a representative in Colorado. Evangelical Christian, was defending gun rights a few months ago, and talked about the fact that if Jesus had an AR-15, AK-47 rifle, that the government would have been able to crucify him. And everybody Okay, that's a stupid thing to say. It's like, wow, do you understand anything? I'm not even judging her though. It's the 1,000 people who stood up and said, yes, yes. I get it. I don't, we're not in the same story. We're not in the same story. And that's what people see though, that kind of thing. The rhetoric is often from the Christian right is abominable. It is from the left as well. I don't care about the left. I care about the church, and I don't expect from the anyway. I hope I'm making sense. Let me finish this quote. When having hardly a whiff of Christ likeness about them and no idea that it might even be important to have a whiff of Christ likeness about them, what is the gospel they have heard? If there's not a whiff of Christ likeness, what's the gospel they heard? Who is the Christ they say they know? Should we not at least consider the possibility that this poor result is not in spite of what we teach? Well, they went to church and they heard the gospel. No, maybe it's because of what they heard and they didn't hear the gospel. Because the gospel they heard was, well, you pray the prayer, you say the right word, you believe the right thing, and nothing has to change. You can be as loud and obnoxious, and you can be as angry as everybody else and do it in the name of God. And what in God's name is going on there? And that's this whole series. That results in lots of people who believe all the right things about Jesus and have no intention of ever following his way. Early days of Open Door, I had this memory, and I think I've shared this with you long ago, but with several of my friends over the years, it was about evangelism. And I remember in the first year I was here, there was a big program in a church close to us. It was doing evangelism explosion. And it was people how to go share their faith, knock on doors, ask them the question, if you were to die tonight, where would you go? And we were already with the answer. And I wasn't real hepped up about that on the front end of that. And so I was kind of under some pressure to get that kind of thing going. But the point was that they train people with all the right answers. If they say this, you can say that. And if they say that, you can say this. So what we were trained in, and some people who went through, not maybe this kind of training, but some other evangelistic kind of training, what we had was the right answer. What we had was a lot of information about Christ, and we're even taught how to win an argument, which is beautiful. Like that image. And if evangelism means make known information about Christ, then we could have done that because we had all the information about Christ, and we could have won the argument. We had all that. But if it meant to make known and reproduce in someone else the life of Christ, right? Yeah. I mean, I don't know about that. I don't know, like what if in fact, I remember telling my friend Ned Berube, and he reminds me of this every once in a while. If you tell that story again, because I used to think I'm 27 when this is dawning on me. If we were to reproduce at the time, not every person there, but if we were to reproduce in other people spiritually what was in us, we would reproduce spiritual death. Yes. Anger, control, nothing that felt like life. But we had the information and we could have won an argument. Which brings me back to this incarnational thing. Definition, I gave it last week. To incarnate something is to embody something. So the devil incarnate, kind of gross to think about that. But actually, it helps me get my head around it, because the devil incarnate is the devil embodied. And I think we can think of people historically. I think, okay, Hitler is evil in a body, okay? Right? Okay, or something like a serial killer who is horrifying. It's evil embodied. So when we're talking about the incarnational presence of Christ in a body, a normal human being, incarnational kind of makes our eyes glaze over. It's not that complicated. We're talking about ordinary men and women like you and me, who are embodied by the life of Christ, the Spirit of Christ. Christ in you is what Paul called the mystery of the gospel. Christ in you, the hope of glory. And going back to this identity thing, Christ in you and me is who we are. It's why we're here. Not just identity, it's mission. Because of the life of Christ in us being seen through us, our purpose in life is to, in some way, declare the name and make visible the face. Which raises this question again, what do people see? Okay. 2015, I took a sabbatical. I had the first sabbatical was 12 years into my time at Open Door. That was a sabbatical from hell. It's a whole other. But in 2015, took a wonderful sabbatical. We prepared for it. I kind of understood what it was for. And my assignment, Ned Berube was my mentor, my coach for sabbatical, was to let the ground go fallow. Just kind of don't do any work, don't do any ministry, and just pay attention to what grows. And the one, he kind of had one rule: there's no, you can't do any ministry. But I had something already planned, and so okay, I have to do that. There was a conference near the end of sabbatical in California with my friend Kent and Mike, my friends out there in their church. I had to speak at it, but also I was there to hear another one of the keynote speakers named Reggie McNeil. And Reggie McNeil was a real missional guy, and his thesis, he wrote The Missional Renaissance. I've referenced that book several times. I think I did last time. But his basic thesis was that the church had lost its sense of mission. We've forgotten why we're here. We're measuring the wrong things relative to success. It was really resonating with me. He made an appeal that we need to change the scorecard. Like, what do we even call success? And it needs to quit being how many people come. It's not a bad thing that people come to our church, but how many people are we preparing to go and live out there as salt and light, as the incarnational presence of Christ in the world? And a signature line that this is what caught me was this. He said, for the last 500 years, and he was marking the Reformation. So since the Reformation, the church has been operating on this assumption that if we fix it, they will come. Meaning, if we fix the church and everything that's wrong with it, they will come. Now, in the Reformation, the church needed to be fixed. There needed to be a Reformation, and when they fixed it, people came, and it's okay. So that's not a bad thing to do. But ultimately, what he did historically was he kind of traced that if we fix it, they will come assumption to being what he called the rise of what we call today the attractional model of church ministry. Because the attractional model is we want to be a church that people are attracted to, but all of that is built on this assumption that if we fix it and make it attractive, the people out there will come if we're funny enough, or the music is good enough, or the color is just right, or whatever it is that people want. And so we fixed it. I'm going back like 30 years now. We being, when I started ministry, it was 40 years ago. So we fixed it, and my contemporaries fixed it by being more contemporary, by being more entertaining, more accessible, more inviting, more friendly and fun. So some got spiritual, and we, made it. We fixed the church by becoming more biblical and more theological. Some people fixed it by becoming more charismatic, and I'm not against that at all. But that'll fix it. Now the people will come, so we fix it, and they will come. Which is why in my lifetime I've seen all these movements. I go back in my mind to seminary. It was the church growth movement. When I was in seminary, most of the guys I was around were not jacked up about how do I unpack the text and make it come alive for people who don't really understand the Bible. They say they think it's so important. How can I come up with a church growth formula that will make our church grow in numbers? Church growth movement was huge. That was followed by church renewal movement, followed by personal evangelism movement, the charismatic movement. The biggest splash that we still kind of live with today was the seeker-sensitive movement. So it's the epitome of the attractional model. I remember I think I talked about this in one of the episodes where where we figured out what people wanted to hear, what would make them more comfortable, dumb down the message, and make it more comfortable for them to come. It was the attractional model, and it was also based on what people who study these things call church as destination. It was, whether we knew it or not, like church is, what do you think of when you think of church? It's a destination. It's where you go. Okay. We've all heard that. And the idea is that we have it, you need it, culture. Come get it, it's here. And when the culture, I go back to the 70s. In fact, I've got some quotes in here about this. When the culture, even just 30, 40 years ago, was more Christianized than it is today, because it wasn't, people would go to church and they wouldn't laugh at you if you did. They might today. How antiquated and out of date are you that you would go to church? Going to church is not a thing. When I was a kid, when I was entering ministry, going to church was still kind of in the culture. It's not true anymore. A guy named Skye Jethani wrote for Christianity Today for years. He's a podcast guy on a thing called The Holy Post. I did a YouTube video that says this, that in 1970, try to get your head around this. In 1970, the church was the most trusted institution in America. The church, the most trusted institution in America in 1970. Do you think that's true today? It's not even close. No, it's not. It's not even. It's not even close. And it's not close for changes in the culture reasons, but it's also not close because of all the reasons you and I are talking about with this, what in God's name is going on, the scandals, the cover-ups, things that in God's name are going on. The next generation, I mean, they're not coming. They're not coming, and so we can bemoan that, and we go, wait, or we can become even more attractive. I don't know, by becoming. I don't know what we would become to get him to come here. It's the wrong paradigm altogether, is what I'm trying to say. I'll get to that in a second. Alan Hirsch, in a book that I didn't write. Alan Hirsch wrote a book that I read during that sabbatical, and this incarnational presence model came to my mind, where he said this: there's a percentage of the population. And this was, okay, he wrote this book 7 years ago. There's still a percentage of the population that would go to church. He had it around 13% of people, if there was a church near them, they would go to church, which leaves the rest of the people who, I don't care what kind of church you have, they ain't going. Okay, so 13% might go. And then he said this, that what you have in that 13%, he had kind of a pie chart, a circle with a pie chart. 13% is this much. The rest is what he called blue water. The pie chart, the part that would go to church was what he called red water. And that's because there's a feeding frenzy for that particular demographic. For the 13% who might go to church, what we need to do is become as attractive as we can to get the people who might go to church to come to church. Okay, it's really lame. But here's what's really lame, really, really lame. That feeding frenzy of becoming attractional enough for the 13% who would go to church, and maybe my church, has absolutely, according to Hirsch, and most of the data is all in, has no impact on the blue water, the rest of the culture. None. Because they're all trying to get people to come here. They're not equipping people to live in blue water that might turn the blue water, whatever. You're getting the thing there. George Hunsberger, in a book he wrote called Sizing Up the Shape of the Church, says we have churches, because of this model, who are actually becoming competitors in a religious marketplace for the energy, money, and affiliation of the people they are trying to attract and keep satisfied through the services they offer. I'm going to read that again. We have churches that are competitors in the religious marketplace for the energy, money, and affiliation of the people they're trying to attract to keep satisfied. Hope you like our music, whatever. through the services they offer. I heard of one church locally. I don't know, Annika, you might have told me about this. That was giving people things to visit. If you visit, we'll give you free movie tickets. Okay, is that evil? No, I wouldn't call it evil. I'd call it dumb. You're like, what? Like what? Like it's definitely, we have it, you need it, come get it, it's here. It's destination. Rather than putting all of our energy into how do we create an environment and provide reliable means for people to become formed into the image of Christ, and then send them and celebrate those stories. Not how many are coming here, celebrate the stories of people who are going there. And here's the deal, even at its best, the attractional model, again, I just said this, has no effect on what Alan Hirsch refers to as the blue water. The vast number of people out there, they're not coming here. We need to be equipping people to go there. And that's where I have this graph that you might want to throw up there. And I've said this, I've really gone kind of long here, so I don't know how much I want to spend on this, but I just want people to see this. Some of you who were here when I came back from my sabbatical, what was it? Well, 8 years ago. I put this on the board, on a whiteboard, and the business industry, politics, education, and those all represent like columns or aspects of our culture. I think I wish I would have put in there things like social justice, racism, things like that, problems in the culture. But the idea, church is attraction. You can see the arrows, is that the goal of the church, the vision of the church, is to get everybody who's part of business and industry, politics, education, entertainment, arts, to come to the church. It's church is attraction, church is destination, get the culture to come to us. Church is transformation, entirely different perspective, entirely different direction. A church of transformation is entirely focused on, well, what Dave Brickey refers to, because it's been our vision for a long time, a radical commitment to spiritual formation for the sake of others. So church exists, and it needs to exist to create reliable means for people to be truly formed in the image of Christ, so they go into the arts, and they go into entertainment, and they go into education and politics and business and industry, and they fight for justice and whatever it is that they do. And your son, my son, your husband, is a cop, and they bring the life of Christ into those environments. I don't think many people at Chris arrests are coming to church. Just saying. A whole different direction, isn't it? And a whole different.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me wrap it up with just a couple things. You can take that off now. That was brilliant, by the way. That thing.
Kind of brilliant.
Yeah. The first thing is this. I feel like I fire hosed everybody, but so I'm going to simplify it. There's nothing new about what I'm saying. There's nothing new, because the movement of God from the beginning has always been outward. It's always been out there. I want you, Great Commission. All authority has been given to me. I'm giving it to you. I want you to go. Stay in church. No, I want you to go. I want you to go beyond what I called the friendly confines. I don't know if you remember that. Did a series on living in an area called the friendly confines. That was Wrigley Field. Beyond the friendly confines. And the friendly confines is a wonderful metaphor for what's comfortable, where everybody reads the Bible and everybody grew up in church and everybody does blah, blah, blah. No, okay, that's good for you to grow up in. That's a good container, but now I want you to go into Samaria. And so there's nothing new about this incarnational model. The second thing I want to just close with is that this model of an incarnational reality that equips people to grow in their faith and their knowledge of Christ, and then sends them in the culture, requires transformation. Transformation cannot be a little cubicle over here that really spiritual people, it's like a boutique thing. No, there's spiritual formation is absolutely job one before evangelism. Now that's going to sound like heresy to some people, because I think evangelism happens from formation. When people start smelling like Jesus, other people pick it up. They pick it up. In fact, that's a basic thing that Willard talked about was that the priority of the church should not be evangelism; it should be discipleship. And out of discipleship, people actually following Jesus, people get saved, people get affected. Okay. Third thing is this picture of the church as a locker room. That's a paradigm I've been, using for years. Every time I do a vision talk. And what it acknowledges, I love the locker room thing because it just acknowledges that coming to church is not the end game. You could probably say it yourself. This is not where we play the game, in church. So don't bother getting dressed up. And don't start hitting the ball around the auditorium. Nobody cares if you're good at no, we come here. The game is played out there. We come to the locker room, to church, to remember why we do it. We come to the locker room to heal up from having done it and maybe gotten beaten up, and we come back to the locker room to remember why it matters, and maybe get a few new plays. Dave, shut up. Maybe just love that person. We play it out there. We prepare for it in what we call church, the church building. And none of this is new, because this way of thinking, I'm ending here. This way of thinking has its origin in the character, nature, and activity of God. Well, according to John's gospel, loved the world so much that he sent his son. And when he sent his son in John 17 started praying, God, Father, to those of you who you have given to me, who understand and come to believe that I have been sent, help them come to understand and know that they have been sent. And that is the hope of the world. And that's all I got today. So that's it. I'm really seriously.
You said all of it?
Wait, no, there's no more.
I was so glad that you touched on the locker room talks, because that is what I was thinking about a lot of the time that you were talking, is those iconic vision casting times over the course of your career, when you reminded the congregation about why we came and why we do what we do, and how the goal isn't to come to the sanctuary and be the best Christian inside, well, as you said, the friendly confines, right? And as someone who grew up in the church and then worked in the church, it's hard to make that paradigm shift, to see that your real life is, or your real faith is in your life acted out with your neighbors and your kids, right?
Yep.
So that's a struggle that I feel like I've been trying to overcome kind of my whole life, and maybe in some ways recently, now more than ever, I feel like I'm aligning my life and my faith in a different way, because I am no longer working as a practitioner in the faith community. But that's a whole other story. But I remember when I finally felt free in my parenting around all this, that I didn't need to look for the Christian behaviors, but could raise them in a way, or attempt, well, that's more like it, attempt to raise them in a way that they could learn to express and experience their faith. And saying the prayer does matter. Yes, saying the prayer does matter, but
yes,
I'm not looking for them to be perfect Christians, and that's not what God is asking of me either.
Right.
So I'm so curious how this hits home for other people, and what are the questions they have. In fact, you and I talked about, we really want to do an episode on what are your questions? What are the things that you're thinking about? And I think we're going to do a Stump the Chump, huh?
Yeah. Well, what happened on Sundays, when there's a number of people who come up to me, and I love it, you guys, who let me know that they listen to this, and they often have questions, and sometimes they catch me off guard, and I'm not sure how to answer it, and but I mean, most of the time I can, and I do, and I love it that the questions are there. Yeah, but we were talking about if some of you who listen have questions, and even things that maybe bug you a little bit. I don't know. What do we? I think you went too far. Great. I would love to have an episode where we just answer questions, and we'll see when that comes. But we're going to do more of this. I want to really. I do know. I can tell there are certain parts of this even that leave me unsettled about. Like one of the talks I want to do. If it's not the next one, it's the next one. The culture spits nails at us, and there's things going on in the culture that really are offensive to us. Spit nails back. How do we do that? And I'm not going to give a yes or no thing. I'm going to talk about that. Well, how do we have hold our balance? Because one way would be to go, hey, everything's okay. No, it's not okay. Or the other one be, well, we're gonna play as dirty as they do. No, we're not.
Yeah.
Anyway. So
well, I think to end, I'm just going to remind people, I think these are the 3 questions that you laid out, but you can revise them if I wrote them down wrong. But it is, do you have the life? And is there evidence of that life in your life, in your world? And does it resemble Christ? Which are pretty big questions to chew on. And
it goes back to
yeah,
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Well, it goes back to that. I think it was an early episode. Let your forbearing spirit be the first thing people see. So what's the first thing people see about us? And so this is kind of cool. At 14 episodes in, we're still kind of circling around some of the same fundamental things that we started these episodes with. So,
well, chew on those questions. Send us your questions so we can stump that chump, and let us know what you think. Hey, Dave, see you later.
Okay, bye.